This episode of Shadowversity is brought to you by my stupendous, awesome, legendary supporters on Patreon. If you'd like to support Shadowversity on Patreon, visit patreon.com/Shadowversity.
Shadowversity.
Greetings, I'm Shad, and I'm a massive superhero enthusiast and a huge sword enthusiast, as you can probably guess. And when those two interests combine, specifically a superhero who uses swords, well, that's just doubly awesome for me. Yet as my interests have matured over the years, like a finely aged wine or old cheese, forget the old cheese part, we'll go with the finely aged wine. I've learnt far more about swords, specifically which ones are good at doing what. Some swords are really good on a battlefield, others are better at cutting versus thrusting. There are some swords that are much better for dueling, and then there are swords that are better suited for dual wielding. And with this knowledge, I can't help but notice that there's a certain type of sword that would suit Deadpool's dual wielding style much better than the two katanas that he classically uses. Of course, I understand that Deadpool can use any types of swords that he wants. He's this awesome ninja superhero and he could use them really effectively, but that doesn't mean there aren't detrimental features that would arise out of trying to dual wield two katanas. So I'm going to share what those detrimental features are and also point out the types of swords that would suit his style of combat much better, specifically dual wielding. The oddest thing about Deadpool's sword selection is that he is dual wielding two-handed swords. One two-handed sword in one hand, one two-handed sword in the other hand. That's what a katana is, it's a two-handed sword. Now this isn't detrimental in regards to blade length, funnily enough, though additional blade length would probably be more beneficial, and Deadpool's swords, when comparing the video footage, we can get an approximate of the length of those blades, and they only come in at around 65 centimeters, which is a bit short. The average blade length for the standard katana is actually around 75 centimeters. So he could actually get away with having longer blades on his swords, which would give him a greater advantage in reach, and that wouldn't be very detrimental, because as I was saying, it isn't actually the katana's blade length that would make it an awkward weapon to use in one hand, because the average blade length for the katana is the same average length to a one-handed European sword. Case in point, I have here a 75 centimeter blade length katana and a standard 75 centimeter blade length European arming sword. Both the same blade length, yet one is two-handed and one is one-handed. So the question is, if he is happy with using swords of this blade length, and there are many one-handed swords of that length, why on earth is he using two-handed swords in one hand each? Now, you can use a two-handed sword in one hand, but using it as a dedicated one-handed weapon, there are certain problems associated with it. The first one, and one of the big ones, is the length of the handle protruding underneath the fist. There is a lot of wrist action involved in using a sword in one hand, and whenever you move it around, you have this protruding length that is moving in the counter and opposite direction of wherever direction the blade is moving in, and this can actually be caught on things and hooked around and knocked out of your hand as a result. This isn't a problem when using with two hands, because your bottom hand is always there guiding the position of the bottom of the handle. It's also a weakness in regards to disarming. If you're using it in one hand, someone can actually come up and grab the bottom of the blade and push it out and disarm you. The next problem with using a two-handed sword in one hand is that there's actually nothing underneath your fist to stop it from sliding down. You see, thanks to centrifugal force, right, when you swing this sword around, there's a force pulling it kind of forward out of your grip. This is why one-handed swords have something to prevent that. Yes, pummels. Whenever you throw this sword, you have a nice handy pummel here stopping the hand from slipping out of the grip, which means you have more confidence throwing more energy into your strikes, and there is far less chance of it slipping out of your hand. To demonstrate the potential detrimental effect of using a two-handed sword one-handed in regards to the grip slipping, watch what happens to my grip as I perform this sword flourish. So, as I do this, I'm trying to hold on to the handle as hard as I can, and look where my grip is. Now, the bigger problem with Deadpool swords is that there is no pummel stopping further slippage in this sense. It won't take much for the sword to actually just slip right out, because there's nothing stopping it. And just to beat a dead horse in regards to Deadpool's sword length, this sword is way longer. Like Deadpool's one probably comes up to about here, making my best estimate, and look how much further this is. And this is a good representation of the standard longsword two-handed sword, long sword length. And while I'm here, I gotta do Deadpool sword flourish, where it's going, blocking bullets, blocking bullets, blocking bullets, but perfect example of what I was talking about in regards to the length. What happened then, the bottom handle got caught with the other sword and got knocked completely out of my hands as a result. This is the problem of using a two-handed sword, one-handed, but dual wielding two-handed swords in this way. The extended handle is a big issue. It can get caught on things and flipped off, but still, I'll do this one a bit better. But see I can feel it's knocking around. And again, see where my grips is? I started there, ended up there, because there's no pommel preventing extra slippage, and it's a longer handle. And seriously, Deadpool, if you're going to do a two-handed flourish, don't just do that one. Come on, we both know that there's a much better flourish you can do. We can assume that Deadpool possesses some superhuman level of endurance, but that doesn't mean it's limitless. There has to be a point in which he starts to get fatigued, and even though he has so much practice gripping and tugging on things, that came out way too wrong, but we'll just continue. There would have to be a point in which his grip strength starts to loosen, which would increase the potential of his sword slipping out of his hand. That also sounded a bit wrong, but you know the type of sword I'm referring to, okay? So, oddly enough, as shocking as this announcement is, one-handed swords function much better in one hand than two-handed swords do. It's amazing. But what type of one-handed sword? Because there's a lot of them in the world. There are historical examples of people in the past dual wielding, specifically with the rapier, but the rapier doesn't really suit Deadpool's style. He does like the choppy choppy. We know he likes the stabby stabby, so he would want a sword that can do choppy choppy and stabby stabby, and the rapier, that's very much a dedicated stabby stabby sword. I can't resist. Stabby, stab, 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 stabby, stabby. Okay, proper rapier sword fighting stance. It's not really a stance because I'm still sitting in my chair, but still, pointy sword, ha ha ha. No, Deadpool really does need a sword capable of doing some fairly serious cuts. And because of that, I actually think single-edged blades is still a very good pick for him, because having a single-edged sword means they have more potential to be better in the cut. To summarize quickly, a single-edged sword can dedicate that single edge purely to cutting and use its back spine to either reduce weight, increase rigidity, or lower the angle of the sword's edge. Each one of those are a beneficial feature, and if you wanted to match that with a double-edged sword, you would have to sacrifice one of those features to match one of those features on a single-edged sword. The obvious detrimental feature with single-edged sword is that you can't do reverse back-edge cuts because there is no back edge. That doesn't seem to bother Deadpool too much. He certainly is able to use single-edged swords very effectively. Even though back-edge cuts are great, he's happy with single edges. So, a decent single-edged one-handed sword with a good pummel to prevent it from slipping out of your grip. We are, of course, looking at either a falchion or messer, also known as the Langsmesser. But Deadpool is a ninja. He should have a ninja-like weapon. Or just make the blades look more ninja-like. You can do that. Or you could use a dedicated one-handed single-edged Asian-style sword, maybe like the Chinese Dao. They just don't have a good pummel. And you need a good pummel for so many reasons. And in fact, if there was anyone who would replace his pummel with a grenade as a backup kind of weapon, it would be Deadpool. Then he could end his opponents rightly, grenade, right there. And so to get a good pummel then, we would actually be looking at the falchion-style single-edged swords over the messers, because messers don't generally have a prominent pummel. They do have pummels, but they're not nearly as prominent as the classic falchions. And if you feel that just needs to look ninja-like, well, you can make it look ninja-like, or forget ninja-like, just make it tactical-like, just that it's built for pure utility. I think that would still suit Deadpool very effectively. 2 one-handed falchions, blade length still the same length as his katanas, proper pummels to prevent it slipping out of the hand, no protruding handle that would get caught on things, and devastating cutting power with really effective thrusts if you use the right blade profile, because the falchion has many different blade profiles. And that's this video done. Those are the swords that would be far more effective for Deadpool to dual wield than his 2 katanas. Thank you very much for watching, I hope you have enjoyed, and of course I hope to see you again. Until that time, farewell.